Kate heard the bell ring from downstairs and dashed to the mirror. The reflected image betrayed no flaws. The lipstick was red and thickly applied, giving the pouting lips a playful glow. The green eyes were right too, the dark eyebrows thinly plucked, the long lashes batting with plenty of body and dark promise, the eyes themselves clear, bright and green as polished emeralds. No eyeshadow, though the teacher thought that eyeshadow on Kate gave a too mature look, and Kate was only 16. Cheeks were smooth, with a complexion that was clear but for the inevitable freckles of an Irish redhead. Delicate fingers dabbed tempting perfume on pulse points and behind pink earlobes as the face observed itself. Kate drew back the healthy mane of thick auburn hair into a manageable ponytail, the practiced hands smoothing down the errant tresses into the big bowed red ribbon. Too girlish? Kate wondered, then left the bow in place. Teacher liked the girlish look, and Kate always strove to make the teacher happy. It was the only way to get by from day to day. The sight check continued as Kate inspected the skimpy garments that clothed the small, lithe teenaged body. They weren't as sleazy as what Kate might be made to wear, that was for sure. The others had to wear such slutty things: crotchless panties, garter belts, fishnet stockings, and open-nipple brasiers. Maybe I ought to be grateful, thought Kate. What looked back in the full-length mirror wasn't too slutty. Just a matching bra and panty set, pretty bright blue. And they weren't silk or anything, just Hanes for her. The panties were French cut and rested high on the hips, clinging tightly to Kate's curvy tight midsection, but simple and perfectly appropriate for a girl of 16. And the bra wasn't some bullet contraption. Not that Kate could fill that out, with an embarrassingly small set of 32A breasts. No, the bra was just a soft blue cotton thing without wiring or teasing lifts. All it did was cover the small pert things and give them a little definition and the smallest shapely lift. All in all, Kate looked just like any average to cute-looking high school girl in her undies. No cheerleader, but not desperate for a boyfriend either. And certainly not some streetwalker. No, there was nothing unusual with what stared back in the mirror, was there? There was, if the starer was really a boy, Kate thought bitterly. The little cock thrummed in the chastity belt defiantly, if impotently. But the crafty construction of the teacher's equipment refused to let the small cock out of its imprisonment. No surprise it hadn't for 8 months, ever since it had been locked on. Kate sighed, then banished the taboo thoughts. The teacher had once explained to Kate the simple, too obvious fact that it didn't do any good to think such thoughts. These thoughts, they don't make you feel good, do they? And your situation certainly isn't going to change, so it doesn't do you any good, does it, Kate? Teacher was always so clear in his explanations, everything so darn unarguable. Well, no sir, Kate answered simply. But a frown broke involuntarily over Kate's lips, the kind that came even whenever effort was being made to behave, to accept. Kate, your thoughts are not appropriate for a proper young lady. You are a pretty, well-spoken girl with a very pleasing attitude most of the time. Now, I will see a happy smile on your face now. Frowns will give you wrinkles and don't do a thing for boys. And so Kate smiled brightly, especially at the mention of boys. Boys, boys, boys. Everything was about boys and being appropriate. And there was the real desire to act appropriately and an all-the-time fear lurking deep down of boys not being attracted to Kate, Kate's smile, Kate's face, Kate's body, everything Kate. And now it was the time. That was why Kate felt so nervous, so flighty, so scared. Kate remembered a time when thinking wasn't so hard, so difficult. The drugs and hypnosis and psychological training and disciplining had all forced changes on Kate in the last 8 months, robbing the subject of independence of thought or even trying to think. Pretty girls don't think, they just smile, Kate. Understand? The teacher had told Kate, who replied with a big bright smile. Oh yes, Kate understood. Especially after a question had been asked. It had been a simple one: why are you doing this to me? And the answer had been an injection. Hours later, Kate awoke nervous and silly and without any thought other than to never, ever to ask a question like that again. After that, the rest seemed to come in a rush. The dressing lessons, the makeup lessons, the manners lessons, the hygiene training, the constant body shaping aerobics exercising, and all the rest. All of it was accepted without questioning of any kind by Kate. Questions would mean big words, big thoughts that weren't appropriate for a girl like Kate. There were conversations, though, with the teacher. He would ask questions and the answers would seem to spring out of Kate's mouth, words that came so easily that they seemed to be put there by the teacher himself. And once Kate had dreamed that there were words that broke the silence of sleep time, words that Kate would use when awake. But that must have been a dream indeed. "Do you like math, Kate?" the teacher would ask. Kate would cast eyes down, smile foolishly. The auburn mane would shake no and Kate would giggle. "Math is just for boys, sir." "Do you like sports, Kate?" The voice was so calm, so reassuring. Kate always knew when the right answers were coming out. Again, the long auburn hair shaking. "Sports are so icky, sir. But I bet sports interest you a little, doesn't it, Kate?" Kate grinned. "Football is fun to watch, I mean. Not to play. Football players are so handsome." Was that answer right? The teacher smiled. "But you wouldn't like to play football, would you, Kate?" A vapid giggle and a shake of that straight long lustrous auburn hair. "What would you like to do, Kate?" the voice asked curiously. Kate folded the small hands, unconsciously checking the pink polish of the 3-inch nails. "Well, sir, I would like to make myself pretty with the makeup you gave me and bake cookies for boys, just like I learned." The teacher patted the auburn hair and Kate knew that the right answer was given. "Of course you would, my dear, and so you shall." There were more conversations like that. As the weeks went on, Kate learned what were the right answers and what were the wrong answers. Also learned were the things that mattered most, like keeping nails polished, keeping dress hems from rising too high, to keeping hair arranged perfectly. Learning when to smile brightly and when to listen respectfully. Discovering how to walk like a lady in the high heels Kate was given, careful always to walk by swinging the hips, not bending the knees. How to keep arms up and always away from the body. Oh, it was all so very important, the teacher said. Otherwise, people would be so disappointed in pretty Kate and we wouldn't want that, would we? "Oh, no," Kate mused. "I know I wouldn't want that." Because when Kate didn't give the right answer, it didn't take the teacher long at all to take Kate over his knee. The teenager hated waiting while he yanked up the skirt and peeled down the panties. It seemed to take forever as he raised his hand and then let it fall hard and fast on Kate's bare smooth butt. The number of spanks depended on just how wrong Kate's answer was. At first, the answers were painfully wrong. But after a while, Kate learned, really learned, to give the right answers. Because you couldn't just pretend to give the right answer. The teacher seemed to know just what was in Kate's head, again those voices at night drifting in and out in the dark, and if the right answer wasn't given without so much a second's hesitation, gosh, Kate was soon looking at the floor as the teacher began correction. Oh, but the bell was ringing, the little tinkling bell outside. Kate had to hurry, to make sure everything was right. The first time was ever so important, the teacher said. Kate nervously checked the legs and underarms for hairs missed in shaving, the eyebrow not perfectly straight, the uneven patch of too dry skin. Oh, it was maddening, all the details you needed to be aware of when you were a teenage girl. Especially for the first time. And gosh, when you had been a boy to start with, it took extra work, like the teacher said. Downstairs, in another part of the teacher's gracious suburban home, 2 men spoke. One, a distinguished-looking man of perhaps 50, smoked a pipe and thoughtfully listened to his guest. He wore an expensive well-worn herringbone jacket which he frequently investigated for more pipe tobacco. The man speaking was handsome, 30, and in a good mood. From his casual dress, well-defined physique and confident demeanor, he might have passed for a polite bouncer at a successful and upscale nightclub. "So," the younger man continued, flexing an arm, "the subject is prepared to your satisfaction?" The older man grinned reassuringly. He nodded, the pipe never leaving his mouth. "I see. Well, tell me, what should I look for in terms of problems or deviations from what you said I should expect?" The younger man pressed, deliberately if delicately. His numerous negotiations in Asia had taught him the necessity of bringing up all details before closing a deal. The older man hooked his thumbs into the lapels of the English herringbone. He liked to wear it in the late afternoons in the fall on days like this. It was a pleasure wearing a jacket like this. Maybe that's why it seemed so appropriate to what he did. Looking in the other man's eyes, he answered the question for the 100th time. He could calm all their fears by now by patiently explanation almost by rote. Well, he began slowly, Kate has been disabused of any notion that she is a boy. The chastity belt allows her to relieve herself, but doesn't allow for arousal. This will cause her pain as I suspect arousal will occur at some future time. He skipped over this as a feral gleam escaped from his guest's eyes, but she will learn to accommodate it. How? Demanded the guest sharply. All questions must be answered. Why? Through 3 factors, actually. First, pharmacologically, her body chemistry has been altered. This was necessary in order to begin the growth of her breasts. There is now more estrogen than testosterone in the blood mix, and she is now capable of generating her own estrogen rather than injections. This alteration will stimulate penile arousal while igniting the psychological factor. Which he paused, clearly perturbed by being interrupted and showing so, has been implanted through neural nets and hypnopsychosis. These processes have supplanted many natural impulses and behavior vis-a-vis the male and female gender. Kate's value system has been rearranged, so to speak, the blocks of values previously held now in a different pattern, this having been effected through the nets and hypno processes. Rather than interrupt again, the younger man shook his head in confusion. The older man smiled. All this means, he waved his hands as if to wave away the confusion, is that whereas 8 months ago Kate was a boy, with all the natural inclinations and desires of a 15-year-old boy, he is now she, a 16-year-old girl with all the inhibitions and feelings of a teenage girl. All? Pressed the other with a wicked smile. Oh, yes. Well, most. It is impossible to erase all the male identity. But that is why the Maslow's hierarchy of needs is such an important concept for you to understand in this regard. You're familiar with it? The man scratched his head. I can tell you the price of microchips in Singapore, but I confess, it has been a while since I was back here at Elgin, sir. I don't recall what it is, but it sounds familiar. The older man's eyes rolled in disappointment. We take such care in devising this curriculum for your boys, but well. Maslow was a clinical psychologist who discovered that within each of us is a series of needs which we need to satisfy on our way to self-actualization, a term which basically means complete satisfaction with our existence. The basics are, as you would expect, food, shelter, clothing, and the like. Next comes what we would think of as physical pleasure, then wealth and power and so forth. Well, in Kate's mind we have displaced the importance of female values with that of male values. She now values female values as basic survival values but is attracted toward male attributes in order to self-actualize. Understand now? The quizzical look on the younger man's face was the silent reply. Very simple, you see. Kate finds absolutely none of the mystery she used to find in things she has been trained to think are female things like beauty, grace, the desire to please, the urge to attract. Those things are lower values, essentially the price she pays for being what she is now, the price of admission. Comprehension dawned quickly on the business executive's face and he nodded for the academic to continue. What she secretly longs for and values are what she has been taught are male attributes: strength, confidence and sureness of purpose, even selfishness. So what you're saying, if I get it, is that Kate isn't some prima donna beauty queen now, right? Oh, far from it. She's attractive, to be sure, but she doesn't perceive her beauty to have any value in isolation from a male. None of what she has to offer has any value without a male to please with her charms. And there isn't any boy left in her? There will be a marginal amount, but that is where the third factor comes into play. The man gestured with his finger. I was going to ask you about the third. Aren't the first 2 sufficient? The headmaster's eyes widened. I haven't educated and trained juveniles this long without discovering that old-fashioned discipline works as many wonders as modern psychology and medicine. Very good, I see, replied the guest. Well, that takes care of the subject's physical, emotional, and mental well-being. What about the legal implications of all this? The headmaster handed him a sheaf of papers in a manila folder, which his guest slowly paged through as the older man explained. The subject is a scholarship student whom the academy took on as part of a program with the local authorities. The subject has no known family, had been hosted by a number of foster homes, and was dangerously close to being remanded to a county facility for juvenile delinquents when accepted here. As a result, the subject was placed under the legal auspices of the academy. The subject was delighted to be here. The older man smiled archly. No surprise there, of course. Were you aware that this is one of the most exclusive boys' preparatory schools in the nation? We can count 7 presidents who prepped here, and our scholastic achievements are too numerous to mention. Why our SAT average? The younger man cut him off. Sir, with all due respect, you forget I prepped here. I am well aware of the academy's well-deserved reputation. Please just continue, he added smiling. The older man shrugged. One of the problems of dealing with youngsters all day was that you could easily forget how to deal with adults. He chuckled. Of course. My apologies. Anyway, it was reported back to the proper county offices and social workers that the subject was not fitting in well, that indeed, was causing difficulties for our other students. Naturally, the social worker who came to investigate the subject's disappearance was quite disgusted. When given the chance to get a first-class education all on scholarship, without the county having to spend a dime, the fact that the subject ran away was enough to put the whole program into question. The younger man was taken aback. Then you've canceled the program to take these students on scholarship? Not at all, the older man reassured him. I reluctantly agreed to continue the program, which delighted the social worker to no end. Do you know that the county spends over $30,000 a year to but I am digressing? Back to the point. Yes, the program continues, but now only under the condition that the academy not be plagued by constant visits from the social services office or regular reports. Elgin Academy graciously extended the program to accept these hardship students under the condition that the only nuisance the county be allowed to ask for is a copy of the subject's diploma upon graduation. The younger man chuckled. Well, how very convenient, headmaster. And how very profitable. The older man smiled in shared confidence. Isn't it, though? And with regard to that, I must thank you for your kind contribution. A grateful hand was offered, which the executive took. Say, headmaster, could you turn on the monitor in Kate's room like you did the last time I was here? There was a slight jump in his deep voice as he made the request. Like a kid taking a peek at a Christmas present, he thought in guilty excitement. The prep school headmaster nodded indulgently. By all means. Let us see what the dear is up to. He pulled a key from his jacket pocket and unlocked the door of the wall-mounted wood cabinet behind him. The open door revealed a dark monitor. The academic punched in a code on the monitor console and the monitor expanded into a Technicolor square. She's so damn cute. The businessman looked at the small figure on the screen with rapt attention. And she's got a figure now that was just starting the last time I was here. Yes, Kate is filling out. As I've said before, she won't ever be a Dolly Parton. In fact, what she's got is probably all she'll ever have, though I haven't had the heart to break it to her. Funny, that. At first, she required quite a bit of coaxing to get her to wear her training bra. She was so obstreperous. Why do I have to wear a bra? I don't like having breasts. I'm really a boy and all the rest. So ridiculous. But in time, she's accepted them, more than that I would say. She's been measuring herself every day, becoming ecstatic if she grew a micrometer. Always reading articles in her copies of Sassy and 17 about breast size and so forth. Look at her even now. She's obsessed with them. The screen gave a clear view of what the headmaster was referring to. Kate cupped her small breasts, lifting them and looking at herself in the mirror. Then she dropped her hands and thrust her chest out like a cadet, an unsatisfied look on her face. So damn cute, repeated the younger man roughly. Then, recovering himself a bit, turned to the headmaster. Sort of looks like Jodie Foster, don't you think? He asked the question self-consciously, almost self-congratulatory. Of course she does, Edgar. After all, that's what you told me you wanted in a niece, a thin redhead with a pale complexion, sharp pretty features, slim hips, small breasts, all you asked for. I believe you mentioned Jodie Foster as Kate's physical model, did you not? Yeah, well I think you're right. The younger man's eyes narrowed. Quite a babe that Jodie Foster. Anyway, what has she been told again? That her uncle is coming for her today and he wants to see how much his niece has developed. That the last time you set eyes on her, she was very, very young. That her long-lost uncle is a very successful businessman who works in Asia. And that if she is mature enough, you'll take her with you when you go back to Asia. The exec's eyes were fixed on the feminine figure primping on the monitor. It'll be wonderful to take her over there. The life of an expatriate is a lonely one, and as I mentioned, the AIDS epidemic is getting quite virulent. It was obvious to me some 8 months ago that the usual company with which I indulged myself was just getting too dangerous. Risky. Still, his brow creased. To be honest, even now I wonder if a real girl wasn't the way to go. Headmaster shook his head. Too expensive, even for you, Edgar. Besides, I'm sure she will please you except for the genital switch, there's not a lot of difference now. And girls are far more difficult to train. Besides, this way you're helping your alma mater. Your contribution pays off in 2 ways. It is tax deductible, plus you enjoy the benefit of a pretty, well-bred young companion. How else can you both save yourself a great deal of money, make our library expansion possible, and gain such a delightful traveling partner? He pointed at the monitor with his pipe. Edgar looked sheepish. I'm so pleased to help the academy. The library needed the new wing, headmaster. I'm honored to be a part of the continuing success of the school. And delighted to be part of your special extracurricular program, sir. The academic pulled on his herringbone lapels and smiled broadly. Anything for an alum of old Elgin. You know, this program has done wonders for our fundraising. It is because of such supporters like you that our special education program works so well. Do you remember your classmate John Worthington? The younger man nodded. Good old Jack. How is he? I heard he's the youngest ambassador ever appointed to France. Oh yes, we're quite proud of him at Elgin, as we are of you. I saw you on the cover of Business Week touting you as the country's hottest portfolio manager in the Far East. Anyway, John is going to France, and along with his wife and young son, he is bringing along a nanny, a certain young lady of 17 named Samantha. The guest tried to trap a chuckle with his hand. You're not suggesting old Jack? The headmaster smiled in amusement. Let's just say Samantha, a lovely brown-haired thing, used to be a young street ruffian named Sammy or something. Too bad we can't help more of our former students this way. The school needs so much work. Why not simply ask more alums if they'd be interested? The headmaster shook his head. Believe it or not, Edgar, most tastes run to the rather ordinary. It takes a very special person to appreciate a delicacy like Katie or Samantha. And the gymnasium does need so much repair. I think our basketball team can have such a superlative season. Ah, but funds are lacking. Edgar shrugged. How much would you need to do a complete repair? The older man scratched his graying head. Perhaps 2 million, at least one. Edgar smiled widely. If Katie is half of what you promised she'll be, I think we can find that money, headmaster. But Edgar, are you offering to donate? Please, sir, I'm successful, but not that successful. However, I have an idea. I'll call you next year. By that time I'll know if it's feasible. On that mysterious note, the guest turned intently on the older man. I'd like to see what I have bought now, if that's all right. The headmaster nodded and pushed a button at his desk. Upstairs, Kate heard the bell again, loud and insistent. To let her know her uncle is coming up to see her, the headmaster explained. As the 2 men approached the small locked door, the headmaster pressed some small items into the other man's hands. He put his hand on the other man's arm, the powerful biceps bulging under the casual sport jacket. I'll let you two get acquainted. She's dressed precisely as you wished, a pleasant deviation from the usual norm, I must say. Take as long as you like, of course, then she can dress. Her bags are packed and you can leave with her any time you like. If you have any problems, contact me at once. The headmaster gave him an understanding smile. The initial training can be sticky, but she is waiting for you. And as much as she is afraid of you and will probably continue to be, she is just as secretly excited about being your niece and everything that goes with it. Good luck, old man, and see you at homecoming next year. With that, the older man walked down the stairs. The younger man looked at the items in his palm. There were two. One was a square plastic package that was labeled stud condom ribbed for extra pleasure. The other was a tiny key with a small tab. It read simply Kate. He placed the key carefully on his keychain, then opened the door. Kate stood facing him, head bowed but green eyes looking anxiously at him. Her hands and arms nervously covered her chest, then with a forced jitter, dropped to her side, exposing her blue cotton braziered chest. She chewed her lower lip, then with a supreme effort, smiled sweetly for her guest. Hello, Uncle Edgar. I'm so glad to see you. The words were offered like a gift that the giver knew, wasn't good enough, but had to try anyway. Uncle Edgar closed the door behind him and gestured for Kate to approach him. With head bowed, she carefully walked over to present herself to him, her hips swaying slightly, her hands raised and away from her hips. Aren't you going to give your uncle a big kiss when I've come from so very far away to see my pretty niece? He chided her. She smiled brightly at the compliment then and just hoped that she would never ever make her new uncle mad. He seemed so handsome and so nice. She threw her thin arms up and around his broad shoulders as best she could. He was so tall, and, closing her eyes as taught, offered the red-painted pouting lips up for him to take as he wished. And even as she had hoped it would all be nice for the first time she met him, she felt his hands roughly reach down and squeeze her but hard, then cup her little breasts. And she was afraid even though deep in her beating heart she felt a new warm and dark thrill flowering. This wouldn't be the kind of first time she had expected at all, as he pressed her down to her knees. She thought, this is a different kind of first time, even as he placed her hands on his thighs and forced the pink-nailed fingers around his trouser zipper. And years later, even after her Uncle Edgar had taught her so much more, when she thought back to the first time, Kate would shiver in terror and delight. Hong Kong, 6 months later. Laughter from downstairs. Katie, Uncle Edgar liked Katie better than Kate, so she was now officially Katie, listened to the male guffaws without interest. Uncle Edgar had so many guests over all the time. Anyway, they kept him busy. There was so much entertaining in Asia. Uncle Edgar said it was part of doing business. They had been at it for a couple of hours now, long after the cook and maid had served dinner, cleared the dishes and left for the night. Katie could smell the cigarette smoke and the clink of cocktail glasses from the party going on below, now and then the karaoke machine with the accompanying Chinese voices. Anyway, it occupied Uncle Edgar's time, which was okay with Katie. She would have been in bed much sooner, Uncle's rule number 9, lights out at 9 p.m., but his mind was on his guests right now. Maybe he had even forgotten what day it was, Katie hoped fretfully. So Katie continued to read quietly, hoping to finish the magazine she was reading. It was an English copy of Teen Babe magazine. She couldn't pick up a word of Chinese, which wasn't taught to her anyway, so she was always excited when Uncle gave her a copy just in from the overseas packet. She was engrossed in reading an article called When to Tease and When to Please, all about dating tips. She had been reading it all night, over and over again. It had just the most super advice, like, tease tip number 1, boys love it just scads when a girl wears tight pullovers. But remember, please tip number 1, your bra should be easy for him to take off once he gets underneath that sweater. Katie blew on her drying red nails and carefully turned the magazine page and continued reading. Tease tip number 2, boys like it when you ask them to do things for them because you can't, you're just a girl, but please tip number 2, boys don't like it when you ask too much. Don't be a space, remember your place. Too much reading at one time was beginning to bore her. She flipped the cover over. A beautiful blonde girl stared up at her. The model was so hot-looking, inappropriate, thought the teacher would say. And Uncle wouldn't say anything, he'd just take poor Katie over his knee. But Katie couldn't help it, and slowly the limp cock stirred. Katie blew on her fingers again and rolled onto her flat, trim tummy, squashing the growth before the troublemaker began rubbing itself raw against the metal mesh of the chastity belt. She emptied her mind of the thoughts, then readdressed the cover consciously. Yes, the model was pretty. Yes, Katie bet she had many boyfriends. Once again she was just another girl, nothing more. The stirring stopped and Katie was grateful. It was happening less and less, but it never went away entirely. It caused her too many problems. She blew on her nails again. Katie! It was Uncle Edgar. I know you're awake. Get down here, I want to introduce you to some guests. She frowned. Uncle, I'm not really dressed, she pleaded lamely through the door. Now. Uncle Edgar boomed. Katie rolled off the bed. She had on a pair of black cotton panties and a tight cropped red t-shirt that rode high over her midriff. Underneath she wore a cute white cotton training bra. She grabbed her pink silk kimono top and slipped into it, tying the waist knot of the sash tight. It only accentuated her lovely curved hips, but Katie was not aware of this as she sashayed down the steps, obediently smiling. Yes, sir? The two Asians were seated on a wide leather couch. One was older, the other a younger, more protégé-looking type. They spoke to each other in rapid, excited Mandarin, smiling and gaping at her. Her uncle sat across from them in an armchair. He patted his knee. She kept her head bowed and minced over, seating herself daintily on his knee. His arm encircled her waist, finding a home right under the band of Katie's panties' thin elastic band. Her hands folded over one another and rested on top of it. Edgar switched to Mandarin now, though he knew Katie wouldn't understand it. My little whore, Katie. You like gentlemen? The protégé smiled widely at first, but held his tongue as the older Chinese gave a more neutral expression. Pretty like your American actress Jodie Foster. But like the actress, her breasts are small. It can be arranged that they are larger, whatever your needs are we can accommodate, I assure you. Edgar patted his niece's knee. Katie squirmed. Bigger if you like. This one is mine and I prefer her this way. The Chinese nodded, then matched his protégé's smile. In this case, I see possibilities. Certain Hong Kong businessmen would enjoy such a pretty dove as your niece. And your supply is secure. It was a shielded question, not intended to imply disbelief but to signal it. Edgar nodded and slapped Katie's thigh, bringing a brief red rise from the pale skin. Mr. Chang, there are more where Katie came from. All I need is your ordering information and I can guarantee delivery within 8 months. As well as guarantee of a volume of at least $2 million. The older Chinese nodded and rose. The younger man did likewise. As if on prearranged cue, the two bowed. You have been a most gracious host and your proposition has been well received. May I trouble to ask one last question? Edgar offered open palms. Anything, Mr. Chang. Why you do this? You are most wealthy and prosperous. You not need to trade in these goods. Edgar bowed and walked the two to the door. As he showed them out, he answered. School pride, Mr. Chang. Chalk it up to an old b-ball player for Elgin Academy. The two Chinese shook their heads, unsure of what the round eyes meant, but smiling politely as they bid good night. Edgar closed the door and turned to his niece. You probably thought I had forgotten what day it is, didn't you? Katie's false smile dissolved. Abruptly, she stood up, hands folded in front of her. No sir. You never forget. Too bad for you, huh Katie? He took a last swig from his higball and placed the empty glass on an end table. Then Uncle Edgar pulled out a sheet of paper from the breast pocket of his suit jacket and looked it over, holding his hand in his chin as he contemplated the typed words. He reseated himself in the armchair. Katie unwillingly positioned herself, standing in front of her seated uncle. Friday, as we both know, is review day. Since you're a maturing girl of 16 and a half, it is important to make sure you are growing up correctly. And there are some interesting things on the list this week. So let's review the notes I have on you, Katie. Ah, a note from your teacher, Mrs. Lee at the English school. It seems you had a run in your stockings on Monday, very unladylike. Can you explain this? Katie remembered she had bumped up against a desk leg and it had put a small run in her white stockings. It hadn't been that bad. She had repaired it with her nail polish as she had been taught in the girls' lavatory and hoped her instructors hadn't seen it. She had been wrong. It was a small run, Uncle Edgar. And if you let me wear pantyhose, I could have borrowed some from a friend, Katie whined. Uncle Edgar waved the explanation away brusquely. We're not going to have that discussion again. Proper young ladies like you wear stockings and garters, not pantyhose. The next thing would be pants, for God's sakes. He laughed at that ridiculous concept. Next year we can talk about possibly letting you wear thigh highs, but for now, you'll be more careful, understand? Katie swallowed and nodded. Yes, sir. Fine. He marked the list. 3 spanks for that indiscretion. Now, I have a note from Ms. Kai, your gymnastics instructor, that you have received a C on your half-term routine. Why? Katie pulled the kimono tight. I can't do splits, Uncle. The girls can, you mean the other girls can, but you can't. You're a girl too, remember, Katie? His eyes bored into her and she nodded. Yes, Uncle, I mean the other girls. But I can't, because of that answer was clearly unacceptable, because Uncle Edgar waved silence on her. You're not practicing enough. You will learn to do a split properly, learn to do the uneven bars, and learn to do cartwheels and flips. You will find that your chastity belt will allow you to do all this. If not, we'll see a doctor about making you physically able to do this. Are we clear? Katie grimaced. Yes, sir. But, she smiled brightly, I did get a B on my math quiz. Uncle Edgar smiled. Yes, but what good will that do you, Katie? You're a girl and girls like you will never be good in math, it's a fluke. Besides, you spend too much on math. I'm taking you out of that class. I want you to learn French instead. Won't that be fun? French is the language of romance, you know. Katie answered with a doubtful smile. Now, I see deserves, 5 spanks. Next, I see Mrs. Wong says when she took you to Kowloon to help her shop, she noticed a chipped nail. Katie nodded, accepting the blame. Yes, sir. I know I must keep better care of my nails. Let me see them now, commanded Uncle Edgar. She presented her hands, palms down. He held her soft, small hands, examining him for flaws. But the nails were a perfect set of hot pink, well-shaped long fingernails. Since they are in good shape, just 1 spank. Now let's see, we have a total of 9 spanks for this week. Well, very good, Katie. That is 3 less than last week. Congratulations. Katie grinned proudly. Last week's no-nos had really put the fear of God into her. But had really paid a price. Fine, she would only get 9. She could live through it, as long as there was hope that someday she wouldn't have any, that someday she wouldn't be a she anymore. She had hooked her thumbs into her panties to pull them down and present herself for her weekly correction when Uncle Edgar wagged a finger. Not yet, sweet thing. There's one more I left off because it's so especially naughty. Katie sucked in a breath as he pulled out a small piece of pink paper. A sheet from your diary, Missy. You see, I was reading through it the other day to make sure you were putting down all your little thoughts like you're supposed to, and I noticed a page had been ripped out. I wondered, why would Katie rip a page out? Had she written something inappropriate? But I couldn't find it. He shook his head in mock gravity. Well, as your uncle, I had to get to the bottom of it. So I asked Ms. Chan, the housekeeper, if she had seen anything like it. And do you know what she told me? Katie's eyes had widened into watery $50, ready to spill frightened tears. She nodded sadly. Of course you do, because you gave it to her to pass on. Here, is this yours? He unfolded the note and handed it to his niece. Katie regarded it ruefully. What had she been thinking to have done this? To anybody's attention, please help me. I am being kept as a sex slave by a crazy businessman named Edgar Stiffington in Hong Kong. He has had me turned into a girl named Katie and tells people I am his niece, but I am really a boy. I don't remember my real name because of the things they have done to me, and I look like a girl, but I am really a boy. Please help. He makes me do things I don't like to do, and he punishes me if I don't do them the way he likes. I know this sounds crazy, but if you can read this, then you have to help me. Uncle Edgar gently pulled the page out of his niece's hand and tore it into tiny pieces of confetti. Too bad Mrs. Chan can't read English. Too bad she couldn't understand what you were trying to tell her. Oh well, you'll just have to be punished for this bit of misbehavior. Too bad. I think 11 spanks are in order for this for an even 20. Go on, Katie, you know what to do. 20. She hadn't had that many for many months. But she had been bad, very, very bad, and she knew she deserved it. Because, tonight she realized that Katie was a 16-and-a-half-year-old girl, and she was and would always be her uncle's plaything. With a genuine penitence, she slipped off her kimono top, stretched out of her red cropped t-shirt and pulled down her black cotton bikini panties. Trembling, she draped herself over Uncle's knees. She could already feel the hard cock underneath his trousers coming to life. Edgar looked at the nude pale moons in his lap. As he always did, he effortlessly unhooked Katie's training bra, pulling the straps back and leaving her back bare except for the innocent freckles. Before raising his open palm, he fingered the soft wires that ran up between her cheeks and around her waspy waist. A slight tug on it brought a moan from Katie. He grinned. You're troublemaker, Katie. It's what leads you straight into all thin naughtiness. Imagine you a boy. Why, you're just the prettiest, sexiest little niece an uncle like me could ever have. He raised his palm and dropped it hard on Katie's rump. Bad little girl. I'll teach you not to think you're a boy. And so the correction continued. And after it was over, her uncle taught Katie just how to be a good little girl. He was such a thoughtful man.